Yeah, though I walk through the valley at the shadow of death.
Hello, once more. Welcome to my channel. My name is Fidelis, and this is on Fire for Christ, where we talk about the things that are happening in our Ghanaian Christian circles in Africa and the world beyond. If you are new here, kindly subscribe to my channel. I drop Christian videos all the time. My intention is to build you up in the things of the knowledge of God, that you will be firmly rooted, that you will not be tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. And so today I want to share a video short clip from Dr. Creflo Dollar, who recently came out with a new revelation that he has stopped teaching on the legalistic way of giving to God, which is tithing. That he feels like he has been making a mistake for all his life, or for the past 10 years of his life, and he has been teaching things wrongly concerning tithe.
I want to start off by saying to you that I'm still growing, and that the teachings that I've shared in times past on the subject of tithing were not correct. And today I stand in humility to correct some things that I've taught for years and believed for years, but could never understand it clearly because I had not yet been confronted with the gospel of grace, which has made the difference. I won't apologize, because if it wasn't for me going down that route, I would have never ended up where I am right now. But I will say that I have no shame at all at saying to you, throw away every book, every tape, and every video I ever did on the subject of tithing, unless it lines up with this. I've done some corrective teaching in the last 10 years, but not to the degree of what we're getting ready to do now. So why is this important? Because religion is sustained by two factors: fear and guilt. And if it's one subject that the church has used for a long time to keep people in fear and guilt, it is in that subject of tithing. And it has to be corrected, and it's got to be corrected now.
And so you watch the video and you realize that he's not the first person who has, been teaching these things. You come to Africa and this kind of teaching is all over the place. People have been or are still being held into this legalistic way of making people feel that if you don't give God tithe, things are not going to prosper with you. That if you don't give God tithes, then you are going to receive curses, and your businesses are not going to flourish and are not going to thrive. And people are being held into this kind of captivity and bondage for a very long time, that people are always oppressed when they are giving God. People are always not happy when they are giving God. But this is not the way giving God should be like. Giving God has to come from the heart. And we clearly see these things, especially in the New Testament, where the Bible tells us that when we sow sparingly, we reap sparingly. When we sow bountifully, we reap bountifully. We see the example of the woman giving the offering in the church, and it wasn't about the weight, but it was about the heart. And that is all that is required. That when we are giving God, we have to understand that as people, we had nothing, and God gave us everything, and we are giving just a token back unto God. And so, like Dr. Creflo Dollar, there's another pastor who is Dr. Abel Damina, who also shares the same sentiments, that he used to teach these things this way, and now he has repented.
When I stopped preaching the other gospel in this church, and most of you were here, and I began to preach Christ, and I began to say tithing is not New Testament, all of that, everyone that was in this church stopped paying tithes and naturally stopped giving. Yeah, all of you here, you stopped giving. You started dropping flimsy change from keke na pep. You just drop it. So now, I'm not putting it on you, but at the same time, I'm rebuking you. And the rebuke is for those who are still dropping change money, because there's no tithe. So it means in the first place, you were never giving to God. You were giving to yourself. Because the reason why you were giving is so that devourers will not come. So it was for self-preservation. It was not because you loved God. Because if it was God you were giving to and you discover that there's no problem that will happen, you will still be giving. But you gave because you were in fear. If you don't tithe, it will be tight. If you don't tithe, Satan will come. Devourers will come. So because of that, you were religiously bringing tithe. Religiously. As soon as your salary comes, 10%, don't touch it, don't touch it. I don't want trouble. So you were faithful. When I now said, no, trouble will not come. God is not a monster. He's not New Testament, all that else. Okay, no problem. So now we can give God anyhow we like. So he started dropping because you were never a generous person, number one. Number two, you were never in love with the purpose of God. You were only in love with your selfishness. And if you're still giving like that, I put it to your face straight, not behind you. You're a selfish person. Because it means you have not understood the riches of God's grace. Now,
but the only issue I have with both of these men is that you teach people for like 10 years. You write books for like 10 years. And in all those 10 years, people kept on raising opposition or raising issues with the things you were teaching. And you ignored them. And after ignoring them for the past 10 years, now you come out and say that you have received a new revelation. And so because of this, everything has to be thrown away. Books have to be thrown away. CDs have to be destroyed. Everything that you have taught should be thrown away. So the question that we ask is that, what else should we throw away in all the teachings that you have given us? Can we trust you again to teach us new things? If you clearly accept that you have been teaching an error for 10 years, a whole decade, how are we able to trust you with our spiritual lives again? And so we see other people like Pastor ADEBOYE, who also goes on telling people that if you don't pay your tithe, God is going to curse you. That the curse is going to come from God and there's nothing anybody can do for you. And these things are legalistic. These things make you afraid when you don't even give to God, when you are not able to give to God, rather than it being a joyful thing. The Bible makes us understand that obedience is better than sacrifice. And so God has always been after our hearts, our faith. And so I leave you with a video from Dr. John Macarthur, who takes his time to break down what tithe means for the new Christian or the New Testament Christian. That what does it mean for you? People are saying that Dr. Creflo Dollar said that tithe was unbiblical, but he never said that. He said legalistic tithing is unbiblical. We are not bound by the tithe, but we are still bound to give to the church. We are bound to give to God. But this time, we are not under any compulsion, but it has to come from the heart. And that is the whole message. So listen to Dr. John Macarthur. I hope that it blesses your life. And I'll see you on the next one.
What is biblical tithing? Biblical tithing. That is a very good question, and I will give you as concise an answer as I can. In the Old Testament, tithe is a tenth. It's an old word that means 1/10. In the Old Testament, you had a theocracy, not a democracy, but a theocracy. That is to say, you had the nation of Israel ruled by God, who mediated his rule through the priesthood, 24 courses of priests. They were basically the officers of theocracy. They mediated the rule of God through the revealed law of Moses to the people. And the people needed to supply funding for those officers, namely the priests and the Levites who served along with them. So there was a tithe tax that was essentially the basic tax to fund the national government. It was 1/10 of whatever it is that you earned. It could be commodities, not particularly money, grain, oil, fruit, whatever. Then you had a second tithe every year, which was designed to fund the national celebrations, the feasts, the festivals, to provide all of that the nation Israel engaged in, and there were a whole series of feasts, as you know. and funding temple events when the whole of the people came together, like the Passover and all those things. Then you had a third tenth every third year, which was the poor tax that was distributed to the people who were poor. So if you split that into every year, it's about 3 1/3% every year. So essentially, every Jew paid 23 1/3% with the addition of a fixed amount of temple tax, with the addition of they couldn't harvest the corners of their fields. That had to be left for profit sharing to let the poor take that. If you dropped a bale off your wagon when you were harvesting, you couldn't pick it up. That again would supply for needy people who would hang around the fields to pick up and glean whatever they could get. So you might say that it could be somewhere between 24 25% of the income of an Israelite living in the kingdom that was funding the national government. That really was taxation. That never was free will giving. That never was what we would call free will. In Malachi 3, when God says, why will you rob me of tithes? That's what he's talking about. That's what he's talking about. Free will giving in the Old Testament was whatever you wanted to give. Whatever you wanted to give. You have illustrations of people giving all different kinds of amounts. A tenth of a tenth was given in the Pentateuch. When they built the temple, you remember people were told to bring whatever they wanted to bring. And they brought gold, and they brought jewels, and they brought everything. And finally, they brought so much that they had to say, stop bringing, we have too much. It's an overload. In the book of Proverbs, it simply says, give the first fruits, doesn't say an amount. Be generous, etc. So you had taxation, which was fixed, and you had free will giving, which was flexible based on the heart of the giver. The same thing is in the New Testament. Even though Israel ceased to be a theocracy because they're occupied by the Romans, Jesus says, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Pay your taxes. The Apostle Paul says, pay your taxes, Romans 13. And Jesus said, give whatever you want to give. But here's the principle, Luke 6:38, give, and it shall be given unto you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. The simple principle is that whatever you give, you invest with God, and he gives you a return. Or the language of Matthew 6, where he says, lay up treasure in heaven. Or in Luke 16, use your money to purchase friends for eternity. That is, use your money for gospel enterprises, because then people will be converted by your giving, and they'll be there to welcome you when you enter into heaven. Be faithful over little, and the Lord will give you much. Don't serve God in money. All those are general principles. So the simple thing is this. Tithe was never, in the Old Testament, a means of free will giving to the Lord. It was the way the theocracy was funded. If you study the story of Joseph, you'll also find out that it was 20% that Joseph determined should be the tax in Egypt. And that really is the historic base for the American taxation system, which not too many years ago was basically about a 20% tax, and is still for perhaps some majority of the population. So pay your taxes and fund the government. The Jews in the time of the Rome, and give to the Lord what you want. The Jews in the time of Jesus had a real difficulty with the tax part, because their tax money was going into the hands of Rome. And the tax collectors were the scum, because they were Jews who bought tax franchises from Rome and then prostituted them into a way to get rich, like Zacchaeus and Matthew. They extorted money. So tax collectors were Jews who had betrayed their heritage, who were collecting taxes for the pagan, idolatrous, occupying Romans, who were extorting more money than they should. The Romans set a fee for a tax franchise. We need this amount each year from the zone that you operate in. Whatever else you can get, you can keep. So tax collectors were surrounded by a mafia, thugs and strong-armed people who would extort the money out of the people. They became very, very rich, and that's why they are always categorized with sinners, with the scum and the riffraff of society. They couldn't attend a synagogue. They were basically despised in the culture. So the Jews were reluctant then to pay their taxes, because they knew that it was going to the occupying and idolatrous Romans. And so when Jesus said, render to Caesar what is Caesar, this was a shattering realization. Jesus also, you remember, paid his temple tax. He had a rather convenient way to do that, catch a fish and take it out of the mouth of the fish. But, this was part of what he wanted to teach us to do. So the bottom line is, always been the same throughout all redemptive history. Pay your taxes, support the government, be a good citizen. Paul makes that clear in Romans 13, elsewhere. And give God whatever you want to give. And the principle for giving is 2 Corinthians 8, sow sparingly, reap sparingly, sow bountifully, reap bountifully. Whatever you give to God is what you get a return on. If you want a small return, you give a small amount. If you want a big return, you give a big amount. God keeps very careful records. Not only will you enjoy his blessing here, but you will enjoy his blessing eternally in the reward that awaits the one who is the bountiful giver. That's the principle.
And so if you like content like this, come on, go and subscribe to my channel. I drop Christian videos all the time. My intention is to build you up that you'll be on fire for Christ. I'll see you on the next video. Take care of yourself and bye-bye.